Well, shit. That was brutal. I'll start by addressing the disaster that was the Cowboys game. I was expecting a potential loss. The 49ers had won 7 of their last 9 games to close out the season. They have a team built for playoff success, with the dynamic running game, their defense. So it's not like a first-round exit blindsided me in any way. It's not about that. But it's the way they played that hurt the most. Just uninspired. Dak looked terrible, only completing 23 of his 43 passes. The running game was completely absent, with Zeke only carrying the ball 12 times for 31 yards. You didn't have a single receiver with over 100 yards. Brian Anger punted the ball 5 times, and it would have been 6 too if it wasn't for that fake, probably the highlight of the game for Cowboys fans, which, again, isn't saying much. I mean, the play calling was awful. And I'm not even talking about the last play where Dak ran the ball as the clock wound down to 0. I'll get to that in a second. The truth is, we shouldn't have been in the game at all. It was a really poor showing throughout the game, ironically, until that last drive where I feel like Dak actually seemed to be putting things together. Maybe we should have been playing with that pace the entire time. Although the real backbreaker was the penalties. Inexcusable to give up that many yards on penalties this far into a season. And it was such bad timing, too. It was on plays that would give the 49ers a first down when they needed it most. Or, it would be after the Cowboys had a big play on offense and it would get wiped off the board. I mean, the Cowboys were already leading the NFL in penalties, and they managed to get flagged 14 times on Sunday. Good for 89 yards, an NFL postseason record. Just horrible. So I'm not going to point to that last play as the reason the Cowboys lost this weekend, because it's not. But I will say that was bullshit also. I understand the ref has to touch the ball before Dak can snap it. Fine. But he was so far behind the play there, it took him forever to line up. And once he runs into Dak and the center just to move the ball a half an inch, which is so arbitrary anyway, I don't know how this is still the way we spot the ball in the NFL in 2022. But once he does that, I mean, they should have given us another second, or at least reviewed the play, right? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The crew chief gets up there, announces that the game is over, and then what? He just runs off. And that's how it ends. How the hell do you end a game like that? Now, like I said, the Cowboys had no business being in that game, but the fact is we were, and it wasn't even a Hail Mary situation after that run by Dak. You have the ball on the 25-yard line, which is close enough to actually run a real play. The odds aren't great, I'll give you that, but they deserve to at least have a shot at it. I mean, that was just such a crazy finish. I can't believe it. Even by the way, forget the letter of the law or exactly the rule book. Just common sense. Be like, let's give him a second. Or at least, again, review it. Anyway, whatever. Believe it or not, there were other games played this weekend. All of them pretty boring, with the exception of the Raiders versus the Bengals. The Bills blew out the Pats, the Bucs blew out the Eagles, the Chiefs blew out the Steelers, and then the Rams blew out the Cardinals. Not much drama really in any of those games. But the Raiders nearly came back against the Bengals, ultimately fell short in what was easily the best game of the weekend. Joe Burrow was solid in his postseason debut, putting up 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Jamar Chase was as electric as advertised, hauling in 9 catches for 116 yards. The Bengals looked good. They're just fun to watch. I can't wait to see how they play against the Titans next week. So let's just go ahead and get into next week's games, or this weekend, however you want to say it, because as you'd expect with the second round of the tournament, the matchups are even better than the first. We should have some really competitive games. By the way, shout out to Odell Beckham Jr., who I usually hate as a Cowboys fan from his days in the Giants, but I bet on him scoring the first touchdown of the game last night, plus 980 odds, and that hit. So thanks to OBJ for that. I also hit on Matt Stafford throwing at least 1 touchdown in each half, so that was enough to bring me back to even on the weekend, because I'd already lost a bunch of money on the Pats game. I thought it'd at least be close, even if the Bills ended up winning, at least, even with the weather, I didn't think anyone's going to run away with it necessarily. Whatever. Anyway. Let's get into it. We've got 8 teams left in contention, which leaves us with a doubleheader on Saturday and a doubleheader on Sunday. The Bengals are again set to kick off the weekend when they travel to Tennessee to take on the 1 seed in the AFC, the Titans. And there's one big question on everyone's mind heading into the weekend. Will Derrick Henry be available to play, and how will he look? Now, as I'm recording this, the general consensus is, yeah, probably. He's still in the injured reserve list, but he's expected to return, assuming everything looks good during this week practice, which is obviously big news for Titans fans since they haven't had him since week 8. Now, it's not like the wheels completely fell off after Derrick Henry got hurt. I think there's a bit of a narrative of that. The Titans were 6-2 through their first 8 weeks, and then they finished the season 6-3. There are a few tough losses along the way, particularly a 22-13 loss to the Texans in week 11, but the Titans have very much maintained their level of success even without Derrick Henry. Still, his impact really can't be overstated here. He's one of the most important single players in the entire NFL. He affects games, plain and simple. And while the Bengals are coming off an emotional win, their first playoff win in 30 years, and, I'll be cheering for them on Saturday, I just can't imagine the Titans coming up short. I think they take this one. I think Derrick Henry is a huge reason why. For the record, though, I do think the Bengals would have a shot if Derrick Henry wasn't playing. There just seems to be something special about Joe Burrow. The dude's just a winner. So who knows? I just hope it's a good game. Anyway, that's the 4:30 game on Saturday. Then we've got the 49ers versus the Packers on Saturday night, the other 1 seed who got the bye last week. The Packers were the favorite to win the Super Bowl heading into the postseason this year. Odds obviously made stronger by the fact that they didn't have to play in the wild card weekend and get matched up with the worst remaining team in the divisional round. And as much as I've ranted and raved about the Cowboys, basically just sucking last week, the 49ers didn't exactly look spectacular. Despite all the penalties, the poor execution on Sunday, the Cowboys did have the ball into 49ers territory, down by 6 at the end of the game. A few things break the other way and the 49ers lose. That doesn't bode well for them against the Packers this weekend. I think Aaron Rodgers does what Aaron Rodgers does. He returns to the NFC Championship. I think he does it with relative ease. The Packers win the night game. Which brings us to Sunday, beginning with the Rams at the Buccaneers, one of the games I'm personally most excited for this weekend. Both teams look dominant in their wildcard games, with the Rams dismantling the Cardinals fairly easily on Monday night. Matt Stafford only threw the ball 17 times, 202 yards, and the Rams' leading rusher only had 58 yards. And yet, they still won 34-11, due in large part to an abysmal game by Kyler Murray, 137 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. For the Bucs, they managed a 31-15 win over the Eagles, pretty easily. But I'd argue that's less impressive considering the Eagles were the worst NFC team in the playoffs. Still a win. A win is a win, and Tom Brady was nearly perfect. He went 29 for 37 for 271 yards and 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. More importantly, they did it without playoff Lenny. Leonard Fournette missed the game due to a lingering hamstring injury he suffered in Week 15. I think, as of now, still no word on whether he'll return for the divisional round. And then Ronald Jones isn't 100% either, plus, the Bucs O-line's a little banged up as well. It's going to be a war of attrition with the Rams. I can honestly see this one going either way, but I think I'm going with the upset here. I'll take the Rams plus 3.5 over the Bucs, and I think they'll probably win outright. But to be fair, I really don't feel comfortable betting against Tom Brady in the playoffs, so what do I know? Still, I'm doing it. Give me the Rams. Which brings us to the final game of the weekend, the Bills at the Chiefs. Another close one, according to odds makers. The Chiefs are only favored by 2 points. And I'll start it off by saying I'm picking the Bills. Okay? Both Sunday games are essentially pick-ems, but I guess I'm technically going with the underdog in both. I think the Bills are the best team in the AFC, and I don't think it's particularly close. I also think an argument can be made that Josh Allen is the best quarterback in all of football right now. And yes, I'm aware that 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time are waiting for him over in the NFC divisional round. But ever since that fluky loss to the Patriots in that crazy wind game, the Bills nearly beat the Bucs before ultimately falling in overtime. Then they completely rolled over their next 5 opponents, including the Patriots twice. They've won each of those last 5 games by double digits with an 18-point average margin of victory. That's completely dominant. Now, the Chiefs are still the Chiefs. They won 13 games this year after carrying a losing record for the first half of the season, and they did that by winning 10 of their last 11 games, including 6 wins over playoff teams in the Packers, the Cowboys, and both the Raiders and Steelers twice. And we do have a regular season matchup to look at as well. The Bills and the Chiefs met in mid-October, with the Bills winning by 18 points. Josh Allen threw for 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. He also added 59 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown just for good measure. The Chiefs are playing much better football right now than they were in Week 5, but I still think the Bills will edge them out. So look for a Packers, Rams, Titans, Bills championship weekend. That's my prediction. Enjoy the games. I'll catch up with you guys 1 week from now to discuss how wrong I probably was about all of this. Enjoy, guys. Peace.